Welcome back to The Lead. I'm Jake Tapper. Let's stay with our politics lead. For the Republican establishment, he is the great right hope, Senator Marco Rubio. And after his momentum short-circuited in New Hampshire, Rubio has rebuilt his stump speech and started to surge again, this time in South Carolina, where he is currently in the thick of a nasty back and forth with his rival, Senator Ted Cruz. The charges and countercharges are flying, and in the middle of all this, Rubio scored a huge endorsement in the state. Senator Rubio, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
So first off, I want to congratulate you on picking up Governor Nikki Haley's endorsement. Jeb Bush, before the endorsement was given, called it the most powerful, most meaningful one in the state of South Carolina. So you now have Governor Haley, Senator Tim Scott, and Congressman Trey Gowdy all in your corner. Ted Cruz's campaign says that with those endorsements, you have to win South Carolina, and if you don't come in first, it's a loss.
Well, we're going to do well here. Obviously, this is a very unique election. We have 6 people out there competing, and you know, Donald has been consistently the leader in the polls here, and unless something dramatic changes, that will be hard to change. But we feel good about the momentum it gives us. We have to remember that these are still states that are giving out delegate support in an apportioned way. It's not winner take all. So we feel great about this. Is going to add to the number of delegates we're going to leave here with. We have a great team, and by the way, they're a great team for us, not just in South Carolina. Trey Gowdy, Tim Scott, Governor Haley. These are national leaders. They're going to be able to help us in other states as well. So we're excited about it. We're going to keep growing. Our campaign has real momentum here. We'll see what that turns into on Saturday, but it most certainly isn't going to hurt, and I believe it's going to help.
Governor Haley, when she endorsed you yesterday, had a lot of great things to say. She did have some choice words for you last month after she criticized Donald Trump and said that that criticism wasn't so out of the ordinary. Here's what she had to say.
I have disagreements with other presidential candidates. You know, Jeb Bush passed Common Core, and Marco Rubio believes in amnesty, which I don't.
Now, Governor Haley walked that comment back a bit, saying she was tired. She didn't mean to say you supported amnesty, but she did mean that you supported the Gang of 8 bill, and she did not. But she did pick up on something that a lot of conservatives don't like, that support for the Gang of 8 bill. What's your message to those conservatives?
Well, first of all, I've heard that. I mean, she's not new. A lot of people didn't support that effort. And my message is we tried to do the best we could in a Senate controlled by Harry Reid. They were going to do an immigration reform bill with or without me. And so my goal was to try to make it as conservative as possible so that we can send it over to the House and have the House take it up and make it even better. And that's not something I'm saying now. I said that during that process. I repeatedly said this bill's not strong enough. There will still have to be improvements made, and the House is going to make those improvements. It didn't work out that way. My message is the Senate bill is not going to be the law when I'm president. That's not going to be the way we address this issue. That's the best we could do when in a Harry Reid-controlled Senate. When I'm president, we're going to do it our way. And that means before we do anything, we are going to secure our border and laws. And until we do that first, we won't be able to do anything else on immigration. And after we've done that, we'll see what the American people are willing to do with someone who's been here for a long time and passes a background check, learns English, pays a fine, starts paying taxes. We'll see what people are willing to support. But right now, the priority has to be to secure our border.
Big campaign dispute in South Carolina today. The Cruz campaign pushing a flyer and a website that has a photoshopped picture of you and President Obama shaking hands. Your campaign is objecting. Why?
Because it's not real. I mean, in essence, it's called the real Marco Rubio or something like that. It's not real. It's a Photoshop picture of something that never happened, which I think is now par for the course with the Cruz campaign. They make things up. In this case, they literally made up a picture. And more importantly, they're criticizing me on an issue that Ted Cruz was a supporter of. They're attacking me for the fast-track authority for negotiating trade. Ted Cruz wrote an opinion piece with Paul Ryan in the Wall Street Journal supporting TPA, supporting fast-track authority. And he only flip-flopped on it when he got a lot of pressure. And even the reason why he flip-flopped was not the substance of it. He flip-flopped because he made up some excuse for not to be for it. So again, look, this is now a pattern. I mean, every day there is something new that they are making up. And I think voters are beginning to notice, you know, you do it once, it happened. You do it twice, disturbing. You do it every single day, it becomes a very disturbing pattern of misleading voters and saying things that just aren't true.
On that subject, last night at the town hall, Senator Cruz had the following to say. Take a listen.
He went on Univision and in Spanish said that he would not rescind the president's illegal executive amnesty on his first day in office. If I am elected president on the first day in office, I intend to rescind every single illegal and unconstitutional executive action. Now, In response to that, Marco followed the same strategy as Donald. He just screamed, liar, liar, liar. He didn't actually dispute any of the substance.
I want to give you an opportunity to respond, Senator.
Yeah, well, that's not what Univision says. In fact, the Univision has consistently reported. In fact, right after that interview, Univision reported that I said that DACA has to go away and that it will. I will, on my first day in office, get rid of it because it's unconstitutional. I was against it when the president did it. I remain against it now. It cannot be permanent policy, and I've said that repeatedly. And even Univision, who conducted the interview, said that after the interview, that the interview was about me saying that DACA was going to go away. So again, another example of him misleading people. Look, I understand in politics that there are shades and people push back and forth, but when you do this every single day, it began in Iowa with a robocall to supporters basically telling them to tell people at the caucus site that Ben Carson had dropped out. It wasn't just a tweet. He obviously now denies, he's gotten himself into a dispute with your own network, with CNN, about what CNN said or didn't say. He, in fact, is being untruthful about what CNN did. And then now you saw today, I mean, it's every day there's something new. And I think it's incredibly disturbing that someone is willing to go out every single day and make something up, thinking no one's going to notice.
Can I ask you why you seem more focused on Senator Cruz than you are on the frontrunner Donald Trump?
I'm not focused on Senator Cruz, but I have to respond to the things he says. I mean, every single day he makes something up about me. If I don't respond to it, people might assume that it's true. So you can't leave things that are not true unchallenged. And so every day he's doing that. Donald Trump's not out there every day making stuff up about me. I have differences of opinion with Donald Trump, and we can get into those debates. On Saturday night at the debate, Donald Trump said that 9/11 happened under George W. Bush's watch, and I challenged him on that. But Donald Trump's not out there every day making stuff up about me. Ted Cruz is, and so we can't leave that unchallenged. If you do, then basically you're admitting that it's true in the eyes of others, and this election is too important to allow that to happen.
Let's turn to the vacancy on the Supreme Court. 28 years ago this month, in Ronald Reagan's last year in office, the U.S. Senate voted to confirm his Supreme Court nominee, Anthony Kennedy. How do you see that as significantly different from the timing for this potential nomination? President Obama still has 11 months left in office.
Well, a couple things. If you talk about the Reagan example, the nomination happened in his 7th year in office. The nomination confirmation process went into the 8th year, but it actually happened when he still had over a year left in his term. This is a tradition that both parties have lived by for over 80 years, where in the last year, if there was a vacancy in that last year of a lame duck president, you don't move forward. The president can most certainly nominate someone, but the Senate's already said we're not moving forward on it. Mitch McConnell's already made that clear, that the next president should have the opportunity to fill this vacancy. I agree with that. We're going to have an election in November. In that election, voters, this is going to be an issue in the election, where the candidates are going to say and describe the kind of justice they would appoint. Voters are going to vote for a new president. And I think that's going to be one of the factors how they make their decision. And then the new president can appoint someone, and the Senate should move forward and on the confirmation process then. But I don't think you should be appointing someone to a lifetime appointment to the highest court in the land by a lame duck president who is no longer accountable to the American electorate.
Let's talk about one of the most important issues for voters, jobs. There's a viral video showing employees of Carrier Air Conditioning announcing the employees are being told that the company is moving 1,400 jobs from Indiana to Mexico in 2017 because it will cut costs dramatically. Do you think anything could have been done to keep those jobs in the U.S., or is this just reality because Mexico is willing to pay the workers, say, $3 an hour?
Well, I think, first of all, I don't know if that's the only reason why that's happening. It's always disturbing to see jobs leaving our country. I think from a policy perspective, we need to look at the way we treat American companies. We have the highest combined corporate tax rate in the world. We have regulations that are incredibly burdensome. We have a health care law that puts burdens on business. We're not fully utilizing our energy resources. The cost of powering a Carrier plant could be cheaper if we were a nation that more fully allowed our utilities to fully utilize our energy resources. We're moving in the wrong direction. So it's not just labor costs, it's all these other costs that are being imposed on American businesses, and that's why American businesses leave. That's why you've seen all these inversions over the last few years. We are now in a globally competitive economy, and this is going to continue to happen unless we pursue government policies that allow America to be a more affordable place to start a business, keep a business, and grow an existing business. And I think that's an example of that.
Senator, Pope Francis was at a border town by the Texas-Mexico border on the Mexico side, and today he was asked about Donald Trump, and the Pope said, quote, "A person who thinks only about building walls wherever they may be and not of building bridges is not Christian. This is not the gospel," unquote. What do you make of those remarks?
Well, a couple things. Number one, I think the Holy Father recognizes, or should recognize, and I believe he does, how generous America is. We accept every year close to a million, or over a million people every year as permanent residents of the United States. No other country in the world even comes close. So when it comes to accepting both refugees and immigrants, no nation on this planet is more welcoming, more open, or more compassionate than the United States. But we also have a right to have a system of laws by which we choose who gets to come in, when they get to come in, and how they come in. Sovereign countries have a right to do that. So there's a balance here between being compassionate but also being responsible, especially in a world where today radical jihadists are seeking to use the immigration laws of countries to infiltrate killers and fighters into foreign countries. So there's as a government in charge of protecting our people, we have a right to have immigration laws. No nation on earth is more compassionate. And as far as building walls on the border, the wall is not just about immigrants. It's also about potentially terrorists crossing that border, not to mention the drugs that are coming across that border and the human trafficking that's occurring because people know they can get people across the border. So it's a complicated and complex issue, but here's what's not complicated. The United States is a sovereign country. It has a right to have immigration laws, and it has a right to enforce immigration laws. And the United States remains the most compassionate and open country in the world on legal immigration, and certainly a lot more welcoming and in our laws than Mexico is.
Senator Marco Rubio, stick around. When we come back, I'm going to ask you about the collapsing ceasefire plan in Syria. That's next. We're back with Senator Marco Rubio. Senator, let's talk about Syria. Senator, you say removing from power Bashar al-Assad is a must. Do you worry at all that doing that could propel Syria into even further chaos?
Well, first of all, as long as Bashar al-Assad is in power in Syria, you're going to have a civil war. He has now been responsible for the death of 250,000 people. In fact, some agencies are now saying it could be as high as close to 500,000 Syrians who have lost their lives. So as long as Bashar al-Assad, with all that blood on his hands, is in power, you are going to have a radical jihadist movement from the Sunni movement in Syria. Even if you wiped out ISIS, Jabhat al-Nusra is prepared to step up and fill that void. So Bashar al-Assad is an irritant in that region, and as long as he remains in power, it is going to continue to create conflict there. There will be no peace in Syria as long as he remains in power. That's the reality of it.
Talking about ISIS, your frontrunner Donald Trump said point blank, quote, "Torture works." What's your position on what Donald Trump had to say about torture? I know that you think that some of the enhanced interrogation techniques should be permitted.
Yeah, so I think we have to understand, number one, I'm not talking about torture. Number two, I don't discuss interrogation methods because it allows terrorists to train to evade interrogation methods. I believe that we can gather actionable intelligence without doing anything that would violate our tradition as a nation of laws and a civilized people. By the same token, however, we cannot assume, and we should not believe, that interrogating a terrorist is the same as interrogating a criminal. In a criminal case, when you're interrogating someone, what you're trying to do is gather information to be able to prosecute them. In a case of terrorism, when you're interrogating someone, you are trying to gather information to prevent something from happening, not to investigate it after the fact. And so the method be a little different. And I do think we have an obligation to gather actionable intelligence. Today, it's a moot point. We're not interrogating anybody. There is nowhere to take them. If we capture a terrorist today, we're no longer sending people to Guantanamo. On the contrary, this president's emptying it out. I do believe that if we capture terrorists, they should be sent to Guantanamo and they should be subject to interrogation, including enhanced techniques that I won't discuss because we're not going to make it easier for them to prepare to evade it. But I don't think it has to be done in a way that would violate our conscience. And in fact, a lot of these things that are going on now or have gone on in the past are no longer in practice. But we can't act like this is some sort of criminal prosecution because we're not seeking to prosecute people here as much as we are trying to gather actionable intelligence to prevent a future attack.
In terms of gathering actionable intelligence, I know you've talked about the difficult conflict that's going on right now between the United States government and Apple when it comes to the U.S. government telling Apple they want them to create a new operating system that would allow them to get into the cell phone used by one of the San Bernardino terrorists. Apple says, hey, that operating system would really put at risk everyone's information, because once it exists, who knows who's going to get it. At the end of the day, would President Rubio order Apple to create a new operating system or no?
Well, first of all, presidents can't order that. What's happening here is a court has ordered them to do it, and Apple needs to follow a court order. Whatever that court order is, they obviously have a right to appeal it, but eventually they'll have to comply with the laws. Apple's not above the law. This is a complicated issue. Apple is not necessarily wrong here. If they create an opening in this operating system, that could be found and exploited by, criminal groups or even other terrorists. That said, this encryption devices and encryption software is available all over the world. So even if American companies were forced to create openings in this encryption and backdoors to encrypted devices, there's always going to be software available from other countries and other places that don't have those things, and terrorists would just migrate to it. So simply requiring American companies to create backdoors is not going to solve the problem, because terrorists will simply continue to use either existing software that doesn't have backdoors or new software around the world that isn't subject to U.S. law that has backdoors. This is a real challenge, and I think there's going to have to be a serious coming together between the tech industry and the U.S. government to kind of figure out a way forward on this new challenge that we now face with encryption.
Senator Marco Rubio, you've been very generous with your time. We really appreciate it. Good luck on Saturday. We'll see you out there on the campaign trail.